Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Casey. This is Casey Undercovers, where we talk about all things books. And today we are going to go over my November wrap-up and my potential reads for December. For the month of December, I'm not going to have a set TBR. I want to finish the year with some mood reading and just relaxing, refreshing, getting ready for the new year. So before we get started, if you could hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave me a comment if you enjoyed this video. And I also wanted to say I do have linked in the description my links to the various apps that I use to track my reading, Goodreads, Storygraph, and Bookshelf. I have all of those, and I recently just completed a spreadsheet of all of the books that I own, physical, audio, and ebooks. So if you're curious to take a peek into my personal library, I will also link that Google Docs sheet down below for you. Let's get started. In the month of November, it was a little bit of a slow reading month. I took on a lot more responsibility at work recently and have just been working like a crazy woman and haven't had as much time to read as I normally would, but I still completed 4 books and have a 5th still in progress. So for the month of November, I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, In Order to Live by Yeonmi, and Scythe by Neal Shusterman. And still in progress, I have The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. Now let's take a closer look at the books I read in November. Spoiler warning for these books, I'll try not to spoil anything serious, but just in case you want to go into a book blind, you can skip ahead. My videos are chaptered for you. Now, the first book I read in November was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, which is a fantasy/magical realism book. I felt it was a little bit more magical realism than fantasy personally. And Piranesi was a book that my friend Anna had picked for me a few months ago, but I couldn't get around to reading it until now. And let me say this first. I really did enjoy it. I liked it. I thought it was very good. It was very dreamy and very abstract. It was nothing like I've ever read before. But hot take, I feel like it was a little bit overhyped. Now, before I get too much into that, I'll tell you that I did rate this 4.25 out of 5 stars. Again, I thought it was very, very good. The story of Piranesi is about a young man who lives in a labyrinth of endless halls of statues. He has never reached the end of these halls. He goes on constant explorations. He's built his own life within this labyrinth and has his own routine. There is one other person in the labyrinth who he does refer to as Other. And he and Other have their little weekly meetings and talk about the labyrinth, the things he's found, and those kind of things. He has such a childlike wonder within him that you really feel has come from his isolation as compared to Other, who seems to be more world-oriented. He seems to have a lot more knowledge than what Piranesi has. Now, while this book has amazing, dreamy, abstract vibes, it's a little bit difficult to explain the plot. You really can't without spoiling the book, so I won't. But the experience of this book is to answer the who, what, when, where, and why of Piranesi's circumstances, while also meeting him before, during, and after these circumstances. But again, I really did enjoy it. I just didn't think it was as hyped up as everyone said. Like, I saw a lot of things in this book coming, and that kind of dulled it down just a little bit for me. The plot wasn't outstanding or anything. It's just this book has an amazing premise and amazing vibes, and the writing is beautiful. But it wasn't quite 5 stars for me. But I did really enjoy it. I do really recommend it for anyone who really wants an abstract book, a dream book, a light mystery book, magical realism. Any fans of the Night Circus might really enjoy this book. If you haven't read it already, you definitely should try it. The second book that I read in November was Heir to the Empire, the first book in the Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. This is a space opera sci-fi Star Wars book, and it was every bit of nostalgia that I didn't know that I needed, and I absolutely loved it. I gave this book 4.5 stars, And let me just say, I had actual anxiety that the book was going to end. I was enjoying it that much. I'm like, this book is just not long enough. I just could go on forever. It was like reading an episode of the Clone Wars animated series, but with the classic characters from the original trilogy. And I really enjoyed it. Now, in Heir to the Empire, we catch up with the three main characters from the original trilogy, Luke, Leia, and Han, after the events of The Empire Strikes Back. And they are rebuilding a new republic. They are kind of still doing diplomatic missions and bringing planets into the fold of the new republic from the outer rims and from the areas where the Empire might still have some hold on them. But all is not roses. There is a new military presence within the Empire that has emerged, and that, of course, is Grand Admiral Thrawn. And he has taken on, as a crew member, kind of, a dark Jedi. And this Jedi is really interested in Luke and Leia, or more importantly, Leia's babies. He has an interest in training more dark Jedi because there are so few left. And Thrawn manipulates this dark Jedi into being a military strategist for him in exchange for Luke, Leia, and the babies. This book was an absolute must-read for any Star Wars fan. If you've been questioning reading Star Wars books, like, it's a lot of fun, especially this one. I don't know how the rest of the series is going to go, but I look forward to it. The only complaint that I have for this book is that the ending was so abrupt. Like, I was just ready to start the next book immediately, but I don't have it yet. I'm going to have to buy it on ebook. I had gotten this book as an ebook from the library, but had anxiety about not finishing it in time, and ended up just buying the ebook on my Nook anyway. But it was absolutely worth it. There are great themes of, like, war, power and control, and responsibility in this book. And it was a lot of fun and action-packed nostalgia. I just really would recommend it if you're interested in Star Wars at all. The third book I read in November was In Order to Live, a North Korean girl's journey to freedom by Yeonmi Park. This book is a memoir, and it was my pick for Nonfiction November, as well as being a prompt from my library card game for a nonfiction with a country in the title. Now, I had mixed feelings about this book, let me just say that, but I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. In Order to Live is Yeonmi Park's memoir of her life in North Korea up until she defected and escaped into China, in which time she was sold into sex trafficking as a Korean bride. And it is a heartbreaking story. Some of the things that Yeonmi and her mother faced when she got to China were absolutely heartbreaking. The struggle her family faced in North Korea, starving, going through famine, dealing with the government and the oppression there, it was all really heartbreaking. Where I have mixed feelings about this book is that I feel like part of this story was embellished, but it could just be that that was Yeonmi's way of talking about the experience and the trauma that she had, that she maybe hasn't fully worked through yet. Yeonmi wrote this book when she was 21 years old. That is incredibly young to be writing a book about all of your darkest moments. I think that maybe in 20, 30, 40 years, whenever, if she writes her story again, it will come across much differently. I think there are some things that she's not willing to talk about. Obviously, her sister's story wasn't in this book either. She omitted that for her sister's privacy. But I think there are some things that Yeonmi wasn't ready to speak about. Some things she maybe didn't go into the details of. And it kind of made her story, as it's written in this book, a little bit rosier or glossier than it probably was. And this book is brutal as it is, so I imagine that it could get a lot darker if she were to ever go into what I think maybe would be a deeper truth than what was written. And then I have a small complaint that the writing in this book was not that great, but for a woman who didn't have much of an education until she defected and eventually got to South Korea, but I'm not going to critique her writing too much, but to say that it was a little bit juvenile, but that is to be expected when you had almost no education as a child, so I won't hit her much. But I would recommend this book if you're interested in North Korea and the lives of people there, if you're interested in women's stories, if you want to learn a bit about sex trafficking and human trafficking on a global scale. This book does have that in there, but I will give you all the trigger warnings because she struggled a lot to get to where she is today, and it's brutal to read. So just bear that in mind. The fourth book that I read in November was Scythe. This is the first book in the Arc of a Scythe series by Neal Shusterman, and it is a YA dystopian. This was a book that I picked for my library card game for a sci-fi with 400 to 500 pages. Now, I enjoyed this book much more than maybe I should have. I have a thing for YA dystopians, like The Hunger Games, Divergent, now Scythe. Like, if you have more suggestions of books that are YA dystopians, let me know, because I'd love to check them out. I ended up rating this book 3.75 stars, which is pretty good for a YA book. I don't read too much YA anymore, but sci-fi YA just hits differently for me. Now, the strongest point in this book is definitely the world building and the premise. In this book, we follow two young apprentices named Citra and Rowan, and they have been selected by a very prestigious Scythe named Scythe Faraday. Scythe Faraday is a member of a larger organization that are the bringers of death. In this world, death has been eradicated. Human disease, it doesn't exist anymore. Pain doesn't exist anymore. Famine, starvation, all these problems don't exist. The government has been wiped out. There is a supercomputer known as the Thunderhead that manages all of the needs of mankind and does very specific things like job organization and assignment, population control, that kind of thing, to make a utopian world. But in this world, because death does not come naturally anymore, there are processes like if you get hurt, you can be revived. Even if you are on the verge of death, you can be revived. If you are getting older, you can turn the corner, is what they call it, and go, reverse your age to the age of 21 at the earliest and continue on living for presumably ever. So it is the responsibility of the Scythes to glean people, and to glean means to kill. They choose their victims by various methods. Scythe Faraday is really interesting in the methods he chooses. He uses statistics from the age of mortality, as they call it, to pick his victims. One of the victims he gleans is a quarterback at Rowan's school, and he uses the statistics of underage drinking, reckless driving, to select his victim as being someone who, back in the day, maybe would have died from a drunken car crash. So he has chosen his victim based on those statistics. But to his contrast is Scythe Goddard. Scythe Goddard and his disciples, his junior Scythes that he's taken on under his wing, they perform mass gleanings, kind of taking the place of mass casualty events like plane crashes and shootings. So he does glean an entire passenger plane of victims, and they enjoy it. They revel in it. To where Scythedom is supposed to be this position of honor and prestige and caring and compassion, they enjoy the blood. They enjoy the brutality. They enjoy the various methods of killings. So you have these two very starkly contrasted characters. They are both, training new Scythes. So you have these two opposing forces. And that's kind of what this first book is about. There is a subtle hinted at romance, love between the two main characters, Citra and Rowan, but I was not vibing with it. These characters did not have to have a love story. I would much prefer if they would have been just friends to rivals, but that's not what I'm gonna get. I got a feeling in the future they're gonna have some kind of stupid love story, but that's what really held this story back for me. I thought it was a great concept. I liked the story. I liked the plot. I didn't see some of the twists coming, and I really did enjoy it. This book is absolutely a great read for anti-spicers and dystopian seekers. and it really was a dystopian story about what life means when death is an anomaly. Would definitely recommend checking this one out if you're interested in dystopian books. The fifth and final book for November is The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a horror book, and it was my pick for the Buzzwordathon for November, the buzzword being only. Now, I have struggled with this book. I seriously considered DNFing it. I don't have a full review because it is still in progress, but basically this book is something of a hunting trip gone wrong ghost story. 4 men went hunting on elder land on the reservation. They are part of the Blackfeet tribe. They went hunting on land that they were not supposed to be on. They killed 9 elk and were caught by the game warden. Now, the reason this was so terrible to one of these characters in particular is that one of the elk was a young cow. She should not have been pregnant, but she was out of season, but she was, and in the process of harvesting this elk, he discovered she was pregnant, and this elk really fought for her life. It took 3 different wounds to take her down, and it was incredibly traumatic. This book is brutal as all hell, and the characters in this book are being hunted down vengefully by the spirit of this elk mother and its unborn baby, presumably. I haven't finished it, so I don't know for sure. It could be an unreliable narrator. These people have just gone crazy story. I really don't know. But I will get back to you on that. I can't really wrap this up or rate it or anything because I haven't finished it. I will talk about this book again in my December wrap-up next month. So what felt like a very slumpy month to me really wasn't a bad reading month, considering I did enjoy the 4 books that I did manage to finish. Now, absolutely my favorite book for November was Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn. I cannot wait to continue this series. The worst book, and I'm using the title The Worst because I have to, but I really did like and enjoy this book. That is Scythe by Neal Shusterman, and I really enjoyed this book. It had its weak moments, but there was no bad book this month, so no worst really, but this was the lowest rated. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm not going to have a set TBR for December. It's more going to be mood reading and books that I've been wanting to read. I do have, obviously, The Only Good Indians will be rolling over into December so I can finish it. And I have 3 other books from my library card game that I have yet to read. I don't know if I'm actually going to read them or not. I do think I'll get around to Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. But the other 2, What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez and Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian, I'm not sure if I'm really in the mood for those 2, so I might pass on those. For the final Buzzwordathon of the year, for December, our buzzword are holiday words, and I will be reading The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffman. Last year, I read a retelling of The Nutcracker, Hidden Sea by Gregory Maguire, and hated it, so I'm really hoping that I'm not disappointed by the original text. The Nutcracker and the Mouse King is my favorite Christmas story. I love watching the cartoon every year. I absolutely love this story, but I have been let down by every rendition of it thus far, so I really need to just read the classic, and I haven't done that yet. Last year for my Christmas classic, I read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and loved it, so I'm hoping to continue that success with The Nutcracker. 2 of the hopefuls that I'm really hoping I get to read in December. The first one is For the Throne, the second book in the Wilderwood duology by Hannah Whitten. I read the first book in January and really loved it. I would like to complete this duology to get it off my list for next year. I'm going to spoil it just a little bit, this particular book, because it's the second, so 3, 2, 1, spoilers. The first book is about Rhaedaris. She is excommunicated from her kingdom and sent into the woods as a sacrifice for the wolf. The wolf is not what everyone thought he was. He is a man, and he is not vicious wolf murderer eating Red Riding Hood or anything like that. And these 2 fall in love. Her sister Nevera has been concocting a plan to come and save her, but in the process of this, she was taken to the dark side of the Wilder Wood, and now Rhaenyra needs to save her sister, where her sister was saving her before. And I would like to finish reading this, bring it full circle. I think this is a retelling of a little bit of Beauty and the Beast, a little bit of Snow White and Rose Red, and a little bit of Red Riding Hood all thrown in there. So it's a fairy tale retelling, romantasy series, and I really would like to finish it. The other book that I'm hopeful to read in December is Drums of Autumn. This is the 4th book in the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon, and I have not read an Outlander book this year. I read one a year the last couple of years, so I would really like to get this onto my TBR and give it a go. But if I do read this book, I know the chances of reading anything else are slim to none. This book is chunky. It's over 1,000 pages. These books are very long, but I really am feeling the itch to read it, so I probably will get to it. And that is everything I'll be reading in December. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wish you all a very happy holiday, a safe new year. Please like, subscribe, leave me a comment, follow me on all the various bookish apps out there. Check out my personal library Google Sheet, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care. Bye.